What is up, YouTube? Jamming away on this. Fender is back on the bike. I like this much better. Nice gloss black with a silver flake to it. So, it's a little bit brighter than the regular gloss black on the strut mount, so there's a little bit of contrast there. But this is all powder coat. Don't mind the greasy fingerprints from working on it. But, that's good. Fender's on, taillight's on. Still got to mess around with the sissy bar, but that'll be at a later date. The motor's back together. I did not get any of the rockerbox stuff done that I wanted to. Just ran out of time yesterday, so I have one cylinder head loaded up, ready to go. The other cylinder head is also rebuilt and done. I just got to put the gaskets on here. So gasket glue these. Zip down the rocker box. The rockers are reloaded. You'll see that video, or if you haven't, go back one. Cylinders are on. Heads are ready to go on. I'm going to turn you guys around. I'm going to finish up this rocker box. I know I filmed one yesterday. I'm going to jam this one out real quick, just in case I missed anything. And then these heads are going on the bike tonight. Okay, we're on the side bench right now. More gasket glue. All we're going to do, lock down the head gasket, or the rocker box gasket first. Let this one sit here and set up for a minute while I do the rest. Well, I found the bolts. They're super dirty and super crusty, but that is okay for now. I'm just going to seat these. I will pop these back out before the head goes on. I just want to get this setting up while we start working on the other cylinder first. If I was smarter, I would have cleaned up these bolts first, but okay, I'll do the final torque on this real quick. Like I said, we're just going to get these set up first, just so the gasket can dry. And then I can come around and pull these out again before it goes back on the bike, but when we're doing the other head, I just want to have this one done. There we go. Now, I'll bring you guys and this head over to the other side. And then we'll drop the oil line in. So rubber O-ring in there, we don't need that part yet. This is the rear cylinder, so we're going to do that instead, at least get that button down. Then maybe noodle around with the oil tank. So if we look at the entire motor, base gasket here, I'm not gluing or putting anything on this. This is going to be strictly motor head on. There's nothing on here, everything's cleaned and prepped. So this is going to drop onto the cylinder, like so. We gotta grab our studs. Let me find the bolts for that, because I'm super unprepared today. Put you guys over here. So the head's just resting on there right now. Coated the heads of the bolts. So these are gonna go back into the motor now. Just going to take a little bit of grease on here, drop these in. I'm not going to do a final torque, but I am just going to kind of thread these down and in. Don't want to go too crazy on these right now. A little bit of grease just to help the threads seat proper. I don't want to do a final torque because I am going to line up the intake to match the cylinders. And if I'm not putting the second head on right now. Now, on these gaskets, they have this bridge section. That's going to break, and I'm going to pull that out. I'm not going to leave that gasket floating there. But for right now, like so. Once it's all kind of glued in, you can trim that down and make that look nicer, but dropping the head bolts through. And the fun part about iron heads is you can't get to these back ones after you put the head on when it's together like this. You can get to them if the motor's outside of the bike, but super tedious to get to these. And I'll show you how to torque these down on the other side here shortly. So we're going to try and get these started as best we can. It's really tedious, but so just try and get them down as far as you can. Make sure they're getting to thread in a little bit. This is where going through and making sure that you torque down the motor first comes in handy. Or clean up the threads, I mean, comes in handy. So even that's more torque than I want right now. So we're just kind of laying this down, getting them close. I'll just back it off a thread or two. I do want the head to be free so I can clock it back and forth. Do have a little flexi extension here. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm trying this. I usually don't go about these this way. But for this initial, figure we can give it a shot, see. Kind of works. At least gets it down. Like I said, I'm not going for a final torque right now. All we are doing is trying to just get this roughly seated. That might actually be a little tight on this front one, so let me loosen this up a little bit. There we go. Now this is clockable. I'm not going to have a ton of movement here, but that little bit is going to come in handy before we actually final torque the other one. We have oil lines that need to go in here. Normally I try and combo these all together. In this case, I have not, but here's how this works. You got your rubber O-ring, kind of a square style one. Compression fitting, rubber O-ring. Like so. This is going to slide up here. And again, I'm only going to put a couple bolts on here. A couple threads on here, rather. Like so. Just so this will kind of stay in place where it's supposed to. Because I do want to have a little bit of room here to cock this and move it, so I don't need to torque these down. But, man, that's going to be pretty. Brand new chrome on there. I replaced these base studs with CAD bolts, CAD plated bolts, just to clean it up. Had the old ones on there, it was fine, but then took them off, replaced them. I think that looks a little bit cleaner. So we'll have a matching oil line on the front here. Now what I think I'm going to do is just prep this other head tonight. So I'm going to let this set up for like an hour, then I'm going to pull these bolts out one at a time, retorque them down, and clean up all of this chrome after they're shiny. Well, it is the next day, and Stupid Sporty's still here. Just re-tapped this hole with the 1/8 tap. Chased all that down. I greased it up before. I just cleaned it off, so we don't get a ton of metal shavings going down in there, because that's bad. Thread sealer on this. Put this head on. I gotta get the heads bolted on today and line the intake up, which is sitting right here. So I'll show you guys how I go about doing that. I don't know if it's the best way, but I like leaving the heads loose until you clock the intake to match the cylinders. Just make sure the intake is lined up proper. So let me turn you guys around and we'll get jamming on this thing. Okay, thread sealer on the fitting. I'll drop this down and in. Like I said, the bottom of these threads are in really good shape. The top side is a little janky, so I just got to be careful about threading these in. Make sure we're actually catching the threads the way we're supposed to. Like so. Oh, forgot my socket broke yesterday. Did not fix that one yet. So that's got to get fixed and replaced at some point. But now this thread's in like it's supposed to. So we'll snug that right down into the head. Clean up some of the extra grease and crap that's in there. Now, on the actual motor itself, we need to just put the gasket on. Like so. And then, the fun part. So flip these around, make sure they line up pretty well. You got 2 oil holes over here, all the thread holes. We chased those last night, so we are good to go on that part. And then the last little bit, sometimes you run into an issue on the push rods themselves. I'm not going to worry about that one right this second, but I am going to drop this down. On the motor, I have the lower oil line in. I usually don't put these in right now, but they're kind of laid out already. So we're going to drop this down farther in the bore just to give myself some clearance. Drop the O-ring on top, and then this will thread right back up into the motor. On the motor itself, or the head itself rather, this is going to slide right in. The front one's, so we didn't clean up these bolts yet. Let's do that first. So I'm going to yank all of these bolts out one at a time, just quick polish, quick back when they're slightly cleaner than they are now. One bolt at a time, one washer at a time. Not the best way of going about doing this. On the front head, I'm a little less concerned because you actually have room to pull these later on. If I get it all back together and these are driving me crazy because they look like crap, which they will, because now I'm kind of rushing, I can actually pull the rocker bolts out of the front of the motor. I can't do that on the rear. So we'll just keep going down the line, clean them up best I can in about 30 seconds time. Polish up those faces a little bit. Some fresh polish would do wonders right here, but we did go through and gasket glue these already. I just want them to be a little bit shinier than they are now. That's all. At this juncture, it's still crusty old parts. It's still kind of on a budget. I didn't replace every set of hardware on this bike with brand new Colony stuff. Some of it I did, but Not everything for sure. Gets expensive real quick. And the fruits of your labor of love and spending a little bit of time with some steel wool and some polish looks really nice to me. To me, it's much more authentic. Do need a washer for this one. Hold on. Now, when we did the final torque with the gasket glue on here, the reason I'm doing this one at a time is because with the gasket glue and a fresh gasket, I did want to make sure everything was finally fully seated and torqued proper on the main assembly. Now, with the glue that's on there, taking out one bolt at a time should not be that big of a deal. I'm sure some machinist or actual engine builder might disagree, and that's fine. Correct me, tell me everything I'm doing wrong. I'm here to learn things. If I can advise or give you my input or how I've been doing things, that's fine too. On the other side, I've got a thick skin. If I'm doing something wrong and get called out, I'm okay with that. But explain. That's where I draw my line. If you come in and tell me that I'm an idiot, I can handle that, but tell me what I did wrong so I don't do it again. If you're just going to come in and tell me that I'm an idiot, I don't really care. Okay. Cleaned up enough for me. I could go through and try and get some of the rust off of this bolt, but I don't really care that much. Head is on. Give it a quick check, make sure the bottom's still good, which it is. Now, I can throw this in. I should probably show you guys what we're doing, instead of just telling you about it, huh? Look at that fancy motor. Gasket's on. Head can come on. Try and make sure you're lining up your bolt holes. Man, this oil tube dropped way down in the bore. Here's the head bolts coated. I'm going to put a little bit of grease or oil on the end of these, because that I actually do want to torque down proper. And we're going to run into the same issue we did on the front ones. I did not cut the gasket on this yet, so we're just going to drop these down. Peel out your little T from the gasket. The front head's way more accessible than the rear. In this case, let's just make sure that these bolt on. The other reason, I know the main reason I didn't tighten down these heads on the front or the rear yet, is because I want to have a little bit of play on this to align that rear cylinder or the intake to the cylinder. The other advantage is that we also want to make sure that I can get all the push rods back in here first as well. I don't remember if I had a push rod issue on this motor. Here's a long flexi extension. I like to use this by hand just to snug down these front bolts. Like I said, the front is not nearly as bad as the rear. You got a lot more room. But we'll just get this roughly set so it's tightened up again. Bolts should thread in really nice, especially if you thread chased them beforehand, like I did. I'll just do a quick hand snug on the washers here. That'll leave me enough room to still rotate or clock this as needed. So I'm going basically to flush with the base of the cylinder, and then I'm actually going to back it off just a quarter turn. And we'll do the final torque here in a little bit. Look at that. Alright, so this one's got to get clocked all the way in. This one's also going to get clocked all the way in. There's a little tiny bit of wiggle room on the cylinders too, but that's the straightest I can get this to line up on the intake track. So now what I'm going to do is take one of the hand-tight 9/16 and snug these down just a bit. I'm going to come over to this side and I'm just going to torque this just a hair. I'm not doing a full final torque or anything, but enough to snug it up so it stays in place. On both of these. And this one needs to clock back. We'll do the same thing on this front head. Just enough to hold it steady and hold it in place. Like that. Now we have two heads that are kind of bolted down. The only other part is trying to use get the push rods back in, which I'm not really doing a final assembly yet, so that's going to hold. I'm going to hold off on that for a minute. Then we'll drop the push rods in. This could bite me in the ass. There's a good chance I might have to lift this head or loosen the head, pull it up, and drop the push rod over if it's a little tight. They should go in, but sometimes you do run into that weird scenario. So let's see. Okay, this is what I was trying to demonstrate before I actually had the heads bolted down. They were not, so every time I would try and tap the intake, it shifted the head. But there is no clamp holding this intake on right now. It's strictly just the two O-rings right now. But when you line them up proper and clock the heads the right way, put the O-ring in between, square it up, two quick little taps with a dead blow. Everything lines up and holds itself in place on its own without clamps. Obviously, when you put the weight of a carburetor on there, that would not actually hold up. But if it doesn't do that, your cylinders are not lined up properly. Then we had to take a quick pause. I had to run inside and check with the boss on what we're going to do for push rods, because I do want to drop these in before we do the final torque on the heads, which means I got lots of options because I'm building two iron heads. I have a complete chrome set, push rods, tubes, caps. And you guys can feel free to disagree or agree or whatever it may be. Let me know in the comments section. I'll try and get back to it as soon as I can. We can run the all chromers. We got black lifters, black cylinders, black heads. We can run the chrome ones all the way up. I think that would look okay, but since I have two, we can also play the mix and match. And what we just decided, so again, let me know in the comments, but it'll probably be too late. I also coated the old set black, so I think what we're going to do is run the black tubes, chrome collar, black push clip, and that's going to be a nice little black and chrome contrast like so. So now I got to rebuild these push rod tubes. Thought about doing a video on this. I'm not sure if I'm going to. I still haven't decided. I'm going to get rolling on it. Maybe I'll show you how to put one or two together and then time-lapse the rest, or just get rid of it, because I'm running out of time and I really need to start putting parts on this, and this video thing is taking a ton of time from trying to move forward. Let me decide what we're going to do and we'll be back. Because if I tighten these down, then I can actually do the final push rod adjustment. This works great for snugging them down, does not work for final torques. Sometimes you can get lucky and use a little swivel. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But in this case, this does work. Sockets really love to get stuck. The outer ones aren't too bad. The inner ones are the ones you really got to worry about. Like I said, the front one's substantially easier, so I'm just doing a quick snug up on this. Then I'll grab another set of extensions and do a final torque. Like so. Like I said, the front ones are not nearly as bad as the rear. Matter of fact, the front one's actually pretty easy to get to, so here's this one here. Okay. Now, get all of these close to hand tight, like so. And I don't know how well this is going to work, given the tools that I have up here right now. That's pretty tight. We're going to go in a cross pattern for the final torque. What you really want is a breaker bar, which I have. I just forgot to bring it home. So we're doing it this way. Alright, that one is good. And the back one's going to be the one that's a pain in the ass because we can't get to all of them. Typically this, in my experience, has ended up being a series of different miscellaneous extensions, trying to torque it down as best you can without snapping or breaking anything. Or you tighten them down before you put the push rods in, which I just realized I did on that back one. So we're going to do the extension trick, and it's either going to work or it's going to explode my extension. Either way, that's fine. These are the goofy ones because this back one you can't really get to. So I try and lay this out as best I can with an extension here. Like that. I'll just re-verify on these outers. That is tight. Good to go.